host of had to do this show on the week. Hey Kim, how are you?
Oh, hey, I got you. I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm really so just say this. Hey, this is Kim Huesing, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Hey.
Kim Huesing, you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh, hi. This is Kimberly Huesing, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
That's right. We had Hugo Schweitzer.
Pete, I cannot hear you. It sounds like you're like super far away from me. I got nothing. I hear some background noise.
What's going on here? Aha.
Hey, there, I heard that.
Okay. Is that better now? Is that better? Can you hear that? Can you hear that?
Yes, like a voice from heaven. Thank you.
How about that? Is that better?
Can
you hear that?
Yes.
All right, we'll put this microphone away. Bye-bye, Mike. All right.
Okay.
So a couple weeks ago, we had Hugo Switzer on the show, and he was talking about the challenges of raising a kid in this era. Now, we're talking California specifically here, where you're also a school administrator. But one of Hugo's complaints is that, the district seems to have moved away. See how he's off screen now? Away from where he is when he wants to raise his daughter. And we were talking about the roles of parents. We've seen elections be influenced by this out in Virginia, and parents wanting more clarity, in Florida as well, having more clarity and input into what a school district does. So I thought we might kind of go through what school district administration looks like, because you're like a very senior person at the Carlsbad Unified School District. So I guess maybe if you could just start us off by just giving us a survey of the role, and it's a large district, right? 11,000 or so kids. Can you talk a little bit about the role of administrators, like your work day to day? What does that look like?
Well, so what I would like to do, Pete, is kind of give a window of just understanding. So that your listeners, may they be aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, have this understanding of what administration does and how to connect with them. So you're right. I was previously an administrator in the Carlsbad Unified School District, around 11,000 students there. I've also been a teacher in the San Bernardino Unified School District, which has 30,000 students. But at that time, I was a teacher, and so my experience was with 30 of those 30,000. And then I became an assistant principal in Etiwanda, and then I was a principal in Virginia, and then a principal then in Carlsbad, and then a director in Carlsbad, and then an assistant superintendent in Menifee Union. That's 12,000 students at K-8, and now I currently serve in a smaller district, about 5,000 students, in Fallbrook Union Elementary School District, which is in North County, San Diego. So the bulk of my professional experience has been in administration, although if anyone asks me, what do you do? I say I'm a teacher, because teaching first graders, teaching noon duty supervisors, teaching parents, teaching teachers, or teaching staff, that's where my base learning experience comes from, is teaching. And you can extrapolate that first grade teacher experience into any position I've held in a school district. So yes, currently I'm an assistant superintendent of ed services. And what that means is, in my house is anything that has to do with students, anything that touches students. So I have technology, I have special education, I had student services, which needs a little bit of explanation, but like basically counselors and if you get in trouble. And then I have curriculum instruction, which it used to just be like ed services and curriculum instruction. That's all we did. But the job has become so huge that what we do is so discrete in so many areas that it really does count all those areas. So in my cohorts so I'm the assistant superintendent services, and in our little triangle of leadership, I'm this corner. And then in the middle is the CBO, the business assistant superintendent. And over here is the HR assistant superintendent. And on the top of our pyramid is the superintendent. So we're called the executive cabinet. And like you said, extensive experience I've had. I'm in year 28 of a career in public education.
Wow. Yeah. So I have my friend Dave Rates on the show, and this take a second, but we'll get there. He runs a nature conservancy, and he partners with, I think when we counted, it was 25 or 28 independent agencies, entities, be it, national government, federal government, nonprofit, all these things, CAL FIRE, I mean, on and on and on, to manage this piece of land where there's in effect nothing. like, hey, and we want to keep nothing there, right? And so it's that complicated to do that. And now you're trying to do something similar, but with, in this case, 5,000 kids or 30,000 kids, or gosh, I mean, it must be 100,000 kids in LA Unified. Is this job, and this is in a big district, right? Is this job impossible for someone in a rural district? What is it like to hire people to get them to stay? I mean, you have to, sounds like you moved around. Sounds like you have to move around in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Wow. What's the hardest problem day in, day out in terms of hiring?
Okay. So right now in California, it's really hard to hire. Anyone who's a business owner is going to tell you, restaurants, everybody has a sign up, we're hiring. So the Fallbrook Union Elementary School District is also hiring. We're hiring people with advanced degrees like occupational therapists who give specific services to students, all the way to noon duty supervisors who we need 3 hours of their love and attention to make sure that kids are safe during lunch. So we're hiring all types of the gamut. But we're not like competitive private industry because we've got a budget that we have to work under, and it's a limited budget. It's not like we could work harder and get more money, which we would love to do. We work harder no matter what, but we have a limited budget. So for example, for our noon duty supervisors, they make something like $16 an hour. You can make $17 an hour at McDonald's. So I'm not saying that working at McDonald's is less important. I'm just saying we need supervisors, and what we pay is that limited amount. So it's hard to meet those needs. What we do is mini job fairs in the parking lot at our schools. Like, hey, you're dropping off your kid. Maybe you have 3 hours a day to give Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't know. So we try to be flexible in that way. And then we have multiple connections across the state. A company called EdJoin posts our openings. We post on LinkedIn. We post on, what's the other one? Insight or something. And Indeed. Right. There you go. That's the HR. Remember that little triangle? That's this guy over here. My colleague is the HR assistant soup. And so when I get them, I train them up. So if you are a noon duty supervisor, you're going to learn about what we do for PBIS. Maybe that's something that your listeners have heard of, positive behavior and intervention systems, because the noon duty supervisor is just as important as a classroom teacher, as important as the principal, that we're all speaking the same language to students and having the same expectations. So when we onboard people, we train them up and give them the supports. And it's really expensive to onboard people in education. So if you start working at McDonald's, I don't know if they do a background check, but in California public education, we do background checks, federal and state, fingerprints, credit checks sometimes for the kind of job you have if you're working in finance. So it's expensive to onboard people. It's a long answer, sorry.
Yeah. So how does that work in districts that aren't in a major metropolitan area like we are here in Southern California?
So you really tap into your local families, I would say. Okay, so Fallbrook is kind of a rural area. It is the avocado capital of the world. So if you are having avocados on your tacos today, they either came from Fallbrook or Mexico. So it's hard to get people. You really tap into your local economy. And most districts, if they're rural, they're the #1 employer in their community. So I know when I worked in San Bernardino, that's a large area, a large district. The Air Force Base was the #1 employer, and this followed quickly by the school district.
Yeah. So if you were further afield, I mean, look, San Bernardino County is really all part of Southern California. There are 25 million people in Southern California, right? So
Mhm.
people now get more remote. Now go in between, like go north of I-80 and south, or north of I-70 and south of I-80, in the middle of that corridor, in the middle of those giant states. How the heck do you hire anybody?
They tap into the universities. So, like we go to job fairs at universities, and we have, so for example, we're looking, like I told you, OTs, PTs.
Mhm.
So we already have connections with teacher universities. We're also doing something unique, and many districts are internship programs. So
Mm.
staff can join in and say, I'll finish my credential, and we can do an intern credential while we pay for them to get their degree. And then they kind of in our district, every district might do it a little differently, but it's at 85% of the lowest rate of pay. And then we pay their tuition and books. So we're trying to get very creative to be able to fill the needs for students.
When you were talking earlier about your CBO, this person is working that budget. It's not like if you guys have a good year, there's a 25% windfall in revenue, right? How much is change inhibited by the amount of money you have available? And then also, how competitive is it? I know, like in county project world, when they're trying to, like, create safer walking or safer bike riding or safer this or better that, if you don't put forward in California a very competitive and sexy proposal, and you're competing against LA County, and everything else,
Mhm.
um, how competitive is it within the state and schools? You're like, hey, we need to build a new whatever it's going to be. Is there a competition aspect to budget revenue? And then what does this to facilitate the changes we want, or what sacrifices are made that we don't understand because, hey, we have to do this one thing, this new, like, I can't imagine the pandemic was gentle on your guys' budget.
Okay, so that's really interesting because going into the pandemic, so March of 2020, we were all getting ready for furloughs. What that means as a furlough is you still do your same job, you just work fewer days, so you get paid
Right.
less, but you still have to do your same job. That's what it means in education. So we were all waiting to get a furlough. But with the pandemic, there was all this emergency money that came in. It was called ESSER money. Let's see if I can remember what it was. Emergency School Services Resources. I don't know. I have to look it up. But where there was an influx of money. But what that money was is one-time money. So each district got a big chunk of state and federal money, and they had to decide, what are you going to do with it? And when we make decisions at a school district, we have to have community partner input. So then I ran interest group meetings with parents, community members, teachers. We even sent surveys to students and staff to find out how do you want to spend this money? So when I ran that, I was in my previous district in Riverside County, and where we spent money is on rehabbing the air conditioning systems because we had to fix the flow of air and the filters. Why do educators have to know about filters and are something or another with the filters? Because we are a people business, right? So, but it wasn't easy with money. We got a bunch of emergency money, but what's important is that is one-time money. Now, they told us we have 3 years to spend it. So some districts were able to give one-time money. If you see in the papers that there was one-off or off-schedule salary increases, that's because they're trying to incentivize the supports for teachers and salaries with one-time money. So it's off schedule. Otherwise, if you give increases to pay, we have to send a budget to the county. It has to get approved for 3 years out. We don't know what kind of money we're going to get in 3 years. No district in the state knows what is 3 years in advance, but we have to get a positive affirmation of our budgets, each county. So there's so many layers, and the money comes in different pockets. Like you have your base funding, and then you have Title I funding if you have students who are low socioeconomic status. And then we got this emergency money, the ESSER money, and the GEAR money. So if any of your listeners are at all intertwined with schools or teachers, they're saying, hey, when's our turn? When are we getting the salary increase? And it's
Yeah.
really hard for districts across the state right now to know what's coming in the future. So once you put something on the schedule, that's forever.
Yeah.
It's not like anyone is going to say, oh, okay, well, we'll take a 2% decrease. No, that's not going to happen.
Decreases aren't popular.
No, well, no one's decreasing the cost of gas right now. So,
That's
teachers have
true.
to drive to work. And like I was saying, those $16 an hour noon duty supervisors, who, as a
Mhm.
principal, I couldn't live without my noon duty supervisors. They're Think of how like cost and payment, how much it costs for them to get to work. So,
How is the engagement when you run these focus groups and you try to make these community-based decisions? Are
mhm.
you like blown over like, gosh, we're going to have even like double the amount of focus groups we thought because there's so much engagement, or would you want more? Talk about the level of engagement in general, not like where you're at necessarily now, but just your experience. How is parent engagement on these kind of things?
Yes. So we do so we try really hard, and I'll say I personally try hard. I've had meetings in the mornings, like maybe trying to catch parents at drop off, during the day, after school, till 7:30 at night. We're trying to we do in person, we do online meetings. We have learned how to host um, blended meetings where we have online and in person at the same time. We've gotten pretty savvy at that. And I will say we never have enough. Uh,
Mm.
we never have enough participation. We'll send surveys and we'll get maybe 5% of our parents responding even to the surveys on the email. And I get it. We're sending an email or a call. You get those recorded voices. I think it's sometimes still my voice to parents in Carlsbad, and I've been out of Carlsbad for 4 years. And my
Yeah.
friends will call me like, "Oh, I heard your voice, Kimberly." But we try so hard, but people are a little overwhelmed. So I like
Mm.
texting. We have a way to SMS text families, because you're at the soccer game or whatever, families can read a 15-second text. But people don't have time to listen to a 30-second recorded phone call or read an email that they have to scroll on. But sometimes issues are a little bit more complicated than a 15-second text or phone call. So it
And what,
is, if you have listeners that are interested, like tap into that school site council, join just the PTA distribution list, or many school districts in California use something that's called Peach Jar. So you go onto your district and you can say what kind of information you want. I'll say, I have in my past gotten complaints. You didn't let us know. And then when I looked back how we informed parents, because of course we sent the information, the parents said that we only want information from our principal. Well, if you get it from the district, you're not going to get it then, because you had a toggle that you said you didn't want information from the school district. So,
when there's two misconceptions, or I should say there's two assumptions that I can think of that I'd like to talk about directly, kind of in this vein. And so
okay.
I'll throw them at you. I'm going to throw you both of them at you in case you want to weave the answers together. But again, along engagement, is it one core group of parents that are like I used to work on the Solano County. It was a subcommittee for transportation, right? And the
Okay.
subcommittees were walkers and bikers, and the
Uh-huh.
bikers were just aggressive. Like we couldn't even meet in the same room because they would dominate all the conversation. And we would normally on the pedestrian side vote en bloc, right? Like it would be like, hey, we all think this is where we want to put our influence, right? But the bikers would come in and they would nothing like they would just were just aggressive, right? And so in my mind, there are an active group of parents that come in and they take up a lot of the attention, but they also get heard more because they participate. On the other side of that too is the I know I'm guilty of this. You have the perception that, hey, I pay taxes for school. I'm constantly getting measures thrown at me for, hey, we need money at school. We're poor. And so you're like, yeah, how many times do I have to pay? I remember back in California, that was back in the 80s when I was in school. They're like, hey, we're going to do the lottery and it's going to change our school system. And
Yeah.
then what do the politicians do? They hocus pocus and they're like, that money we used to budget for schools is now covered by the lottery. You're like, oh, this is supposed to be in addition, and so all these things going. And so as a voter, you're like, why are you asking me for more money all the damn time? Right. And so I know that that's probably not a fair thing, but that is what we're left with.
Mm-hmm. So, your first question was, how do you basically hear the voices in the room, and do some people kind of dominate the
Yeah, do a
conversation?
group of parents
Yeah.
dominate
Yeah.
conversations?
It depends. And education is so near and dear to parents' hearts. So it kind of depends on what's going on. If I'll say in a district, like there was a district to the north of us that had a student die on campus, right? So I know in that campus or in that district, student discipline was a huge issue. They added all kinds of staff and all kinds of supports because it was a discipline related issue. So it can be local like that. In other districts, special ed parents become maybe the primary focus because perhaps there were some concerns that special needs students were getting too much of the attention, too little of the attention. Maybe there was some big case. And sometimes, like in LA, I'm sure forever, the HR department was inundated because of the sexual assault story that came out of one of their elementary schools. So it can be localized. I'll say what parents generally are worried about is, do they have qualified teachers? Do the teachers in their kids' classrooms seem engaged and like their kids? And do their schools look like they are safe, engaging places? I'll say those are the big issues. Like generally in leadership, you want a competent leader. So is the teacher competent? Is the principal competent? Is the school safe? I would say those are the big issues. And then you'll have these bubble issues because of the circumstances.
And is it really because you're always wanting more parent engagement, is it a cadre of parents that remain involved, good or bad, and like they're their main voice and you'd love to hear from more, but they're just not willing?
Yeah, I mean, parents, just look in your emails. You'll see 100 requests for respond to a survey, especially between February and March. That's when we're doing our LCAP, which if you don't know what the word LCAP means, it's local control and accountability plan. So that's how we spend our money. So every district every year is sending out, please tell us what you want more of. What are we going to do? What can we do to serve your students better? I know from my experience, that's how I was able to get in counselors, because when parents responded, hey, counseling is really important. So I was at that time in that district a little ahead of the curve and added a counselor at every elementary school. And I'll tell you, that is very unique. In California, elementary schools do not have counselors. Barely any elementary schools have an assistant principal, because when I was a principal, I had almost 900 kids, and it was me and my school secretary. Yeah, I got it. So it just kind of depends on what is, and it really, I'm telling you, when parents say, hey, we want this in the LCAP survey, that's what happens, because we can have the ability to shift focus.
One of the things we talked about in our chat yesterday was parents being able to support their kids in school. And I wanted to blend in inclusivity, because this is one of the things we've gotten better at through our generation, right? I was telling you about a guy I graduated with, a friend who's got Asperger's, and pretty severe, but he can manage his own life and everything. But he gets all the way through school, gets a college degree. And I don't know how many people did that before him, but it can't be a lot of people. But now it's a fairly common thing. So we're managing to get a lot more kids through school, whether they need off-track stuff or online stuff or whatever it is. But that also means that we all have to tolerate quite a bit of ambiguity and newness and change.
All right. So coaching parents on how to have your kids be successful in school is one of my favorite things. I think I did that really well as a teacher, as an AAP, an assistant principal, and as a principal, making school really understandable to our clients, our students, and our parents. But what I'm trying to explain is that our base of clients is so vast. Every school is a microcosm of society. So if you think of like the whole rainbow of what you could have in any society, you can find it in every school. In a 400 kid school, a 1,000 kid school, you've got everything there. So and I would say over my career, it used to be maybe 5% of our kids were special needs, and now it's teetering on 15 and sometimes 20 to 22% of students are special needs. And the special needs spectrum goes anything from kids who just need a little bit of speech therapy because they are having a hard time getting their R's or their THs, to a student who needs feeding at school. You probably don't realize that kids are attending almost every single public school that needs a personal nurse that connects their feeding tube every day and does physical therapy, occupational therapy. They get nursing services, obviously toileting services, um, anything cognitive, all those kind of services in that little public school that's down the street from your house, because we want all kids to experience being part of an educational community. And when you and I were in school, Pete, that did not happen.
That did not happen. You might have the occasional kid in a wheelchair, but that kid was fairly self-sufficient, right? So someone who needed bathroom and feeding help wasn't the norm when I was there. And there was a special ed class and they kind of tucked them away, but they never interacted with the main body of the population either.
And
With that,
we really try to get all kids integrated and in and out of classrooms and part of the community. Mm-hmm.
I want to jump in with that too, but you also said you went from about 5% and really an explosion, an exponential growth to 15-ish%. That is, boy, that's hard to budget for, because that's got to be expensive to hire a nurse, because that nurse can't be like, I've got 50 kids, and she's out there like bathroom time,
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be, how do you predict these kind of cost increases, especially as this growth in special needs seems to be expanding?
Yeah, I don't know how you budget that. I'm really have been fortunate in my life to work with some very talented business officials. And I'll say we get pretty creative. But you can look at how much special education encroaches into the general fund, because when I was a principal, parents would say, oh, you just want the extra money because my kid is special ed. There's not any extra special money that comes with a special education with an IEP. It takes from the general ed population. I was explaining to you yesterday. So my kid, thankfully, she's special to my heart.
Her own way.
Got her own special talents, but she does not have an IEP. She doesn't have any special education learning needs, other than really needing me to be on top of her, turning her homework, but she does not qualify for special education. So, but she comes with this amount of money, right, from the state. I don't know what our local education agency is per pupil funded. Let's say $8,500 a year. That's what she comes with. Well, if she had an IEP and needed a nurse, guess how much the district would get for her?
It's got to be double
$8,500 a year. Mm-hmm. Now, if she was a student who was low income, she would get a little bump. The district would get more money for her to do lunch, and maybe if she's Title I, then the district would get extra money for that. A second language learner incurs a little bit of extra money from the state to support second language services, second language learner services. Or if you're a foster kid, a little bit of extra money follows foster kids. And you can see why students who come from low socioeconomic, second language learner or foster situations, foster homeless situations, they need extra services. So the district has the ability to attach the funding to the needs of those students. And then each school makes a plan how they're going to spend that money, because the schools, then it gets to the district, and then we divide that up to the schools, and then each school makes a single plan for student achievement. So you can see in the plan, and it's all very transparent, how the school is spending that money. You can ask any principal to see their single plan, and they'll be like, oh, you want to see it? Wow, here it is. I thought only that lady at the district office wanted to see my single plan.
That's fantastic. So when you talk about these resources, and we have this this explosion and exposure to trans kids, and I'm saying trans at all, any kind of alternate orientation, sexuality, gender kind of thing. There's just a lot more of that to cover down on.
Yeah.
How do we deal?
There's no extra money for that, but what we have developed in our schools is extra bigger hearts. So I told you yesterday, like, when kids come to school, my job is just to make that kid feel like he, she, them, they are learners, that they're welcome at my school, that they have a spot in our community, and I want that child to learn. And then kids come with all kinds of personal experiences and experiences at home, experiences from their parents, experiences from their community. And my job is to make sure that every child is appreciated for who they are and the potential they have to be a learner. And yeah, sometimes it's kind of challenging. But I'm smiling because I'm thinking of the kids that I personally worked with and what success stories I have. Not that it was always easy. And,
Yeah.
I learned a lot from some kids and working with their families. I learned a lot. But if you are just open with your teachers and your administrators, as the parent of a kid with any special need, if you're open with the school, they'll work with you. It's when you try to hide stories and play games, it gets really hard. So my
Right.
best advice is just to be super open with your teacher and your principal and tell them what's going on and seek their advice and counsel and help, and they'll be your biggest partners.
I guess the flip side of that is when you have a kid that doesn't fit into the pegs, they're not square, they're not round, they're just not going to get anywhere near a hole. Um,
Mhm.
and you can't get the school's attention because they're, like we often say, like in terms of policing or military, oh, they don't have the enough training or the right kind of training. I'm betting that you're not like sitting around with training hours. You're like, nah, we got nobody wanting to show up for training. I imagine it's the other way around where like I have 8 times the amount of training I could give out to these guys on a variety of subjects. So when we look at dealing with all of these variables, whether it's based on orientation or spectrum, presence, is there?
Uh-huh.
I guess what I want to ask is there a wasteland of training that you would love to fill, but there's just no capacity for it, money, time, attention? Or
Mhm.
or is I mean,
Yeah.
would you like to train your people more? Because that's part of what you do, right?
Yeah, that is a big part of what I do in ed services. And we do have teachers come in and work during their summer and get extra training. They really do. They stay after school and get paid extra hours to do the training. And then what we have been able to do in the past, which is really hard to do right now, is we'll put a sub in the teacher's classroom and pull the teacher to a centralized place and do training. But we don't have
Yeah,
enough subs to release teachers right now.
yeah.
We That's really hard. So we're working in a situation right now that we're not exactly familiar with because of the lack of subs. There is a lot of training out there. I want to just share an acronym. It's called SEL, Social Emotional Learning. And years ago,
Mhm.
that wasn't even a curriculum. And now every district has a social emotional learning curriculum. I've worked
Yeah.
with something that's called Sanford Harmony. I've worked with Second Step, and currently I'm working with a curriculum called Character Strong. And the root basis of all of these curriculums are for kids to appreciate and understand themselves and what they need, and appreciate and value the attributes of others. So, believe it or not, kids come to school not whole. Like
Mm.
they have not been told that they are capable and strong and smart. They don't have that like self-esteem, and so that can manifest itself in a lot of negative ways in school and with each other. And so when we spend the time to build a classroom community and teach kids how to treat each other nicely, use nice words, um, accept others' apologies, and move forward, that helps the whole learning community. But that is a big investment of time and training. I mean,
Yeah.
I, you got to think, you got to spend another 20, 30 minutes a day just teaching social emotional learning because kids are coming to school with like this TikTok education on
Yeah.
how to beat kids up. I mean, there's a whole middle school lifestyle. Kids watch kid fights.
I
There's all
wanna
these.
I wanna get into external influences in a second here because that
Oh,
is fascinating to me. The problem
fighting
is
it.
that yeah,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that something like that has always existed. It's just real, constant, and so much bigger now.
Yeah.
Going back to the thing with training, so then
Mhm.
if your kid doesn't fit into somewhere in that gigantic wide space that you guys try to create for kids,
Yep.
and you can't get the school's attention because there's literally no more attention to give, what do you do? Like if your kid, like how many parents are at their wits' ends? We're like, I've been through the whole parenting book and a page for my kid is missing. And
Yep.
then they come to you guys and you're like, uh, and there's not enough capacity for every kid that needs that extra thing.
Okay, but Pete, I'm going to push back on that
Please.
because I'm okay. Elementary school, at least. I'm going to just say elementary school.
Right.
There's not, okay, I guess there are some principals who are not reachable. I guess there are. But if you go to any elementary school, you're going to see the principal's the one leaning in the traffic. They're out there every morning, unless they've got like some meeting that they can't be there. But you parents hop out of your car and be like, excuse me, Dr. Huesing, I have a question. And the principal will say, oh my gosh, right now I'm doing traffic. Like, come on, pull up, and they're dealing with that. But they'll say, call my secretary, I'll get you in today, or I'll call you this afternoon, I'll text you, blah, blah, blah. Because, okay, so I have in my career had some kids who are really challenging, but I know who's the teacher who likes that kid. So I know which is the whisperer for the kind of the mean kid who like stabs another kid in the shoulder with a pencil. I've had that. And I found the teacher who loved that kid and found their special talent, and they did like dig into that special talent. And 2 months later, amazing, that kid is student of the month because the teacher made a connection with them. So and it's not always like a magic fit right at the beginning. You don't try not to as a principal, but you do move kids after the beginning of the year. It's kind of a secret little principal society. We don't talk about it, but we do it when it's necessary for the kids. And sometimes the teachers come to us and say, okay, so Erin has this kid, but I'm proud I can take him. And then she's going to take this other kid because I know the family. But I'm going to push back and say most times the teachers want to work with the kids. Now, if you offend a teacher and you are super snotty to the teacher or put them down, I had a parent type an email in all caps to one of my teachers, one of the best teachers I've ever seen in my life. She emailed me, said, this is harassment. And I called the parent and I said, stop emailing my teacher in all caps. If you want to connect with the teacher, call me first.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you should probably not try to be really mean to a teacher because they won't forget it. But most teachers are going to want to work with you. Most principals are going to want to work with you. So I'll push back on that there's not enough room because that's what we do.
I hear you. And I know, like, for the parents that are out there that don't experience that, I mean, you and I both know someone that their kid was struggling to stay within the norms. And this kid's got plenty of things to deal with, and stacked up a bunch of tardies, was barely able to go to school. When that person did go to school, that person was barely, wasn't going for it. Right. And the school failed that person. They like they had all these things lined up. You have all this Saturday school to do. And then the calendar year flipped over and it's like, oh, it's all forgiven. And it was as if there was no penalty for all this bad behavior. And then that teacher that they had identified for this person, that whole program failed too. So it was like everything you thought would happen. And I'm not assigning blame. I'm just saying that there's a lot of kids that need a lot of help. And so this is my pushback, your pushback. And I hear what you're saying, but there's going to be a lot of parents like
always work that. I know I can't be so Pollyanna to think.
But what do you do though when your kid is that kid? You're like, you're trying to, like when juvie is an option, you're like, I don't want my kid to go to juvie and I can't seem to get enough help.
Okay, so I have strategies. You call that. Remember, I told you in my house in ed services, there's the student services. In some districts, it's called pupil personnel services. In some districts, it's called like student success services. But there is an administrator at the district level that's in charge of like counselors, discipline, social emotional learning. You reach out to that person and say, okay, I'm not a fit for this school. What are my options? And you tell the story. I mean, mine is Kimberly. So Kimberly did not connect with the teacher. The principal wouldn't move her. I get it. It's, that's not what they do. And the principal's just supporting the teacher. It's just not working. And P.S. there's 5 other kids at that school who've bullied my kid, or my kid feels bullied. What are my options? The only job of that administrator is to solve your problem. So I don't know if the person we're talking about got the student services director on the horn and was able to share that. But that's a strategy, okay? And then you can just on your own start looking at other schools in the district, outside of the district, because in the district transfers are called intra-district transfers. I only know this because it was my job at some point. And then there's inter-district transfers, and that's going out of the district. Inter-district transfers can kind of get a little spicy because then you're talking about funding for kids. And unless the money follows the kid, it's going to be really hard for the district to take another child.
Right.
But those specifics, like there are strategies there.
Right.
So I would, or you might want to look for a private school. Maybe your kid is like so excited about music. Well, most public schools can't have a full-on music program, but some private schools, they can only focus on music, or they
Right.
can afford to have a focus on music.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. And I know these problems aren't easy. I mean, every kid presents its own unique thing. And you guys, I guess, let me ask you this question. Are we trying to be too a la carte in the school districts, and catering to too many things? Are we taking on more than is budgetarily and time wise, and just all of the provisioning that takes to be this a la carte? Should we be a little more one size fits all? Or
Uh,
maybe we should be more a la carte. I don't know. You tell me.
well, okay. So here's what we want for kids. We want kids to have enough reading, writing, math, problem solving, communication skills to be successful at the next level. Um, and there are things that kids need to learn, skills wise, but the standards in the state are very lofty. These Common Core state standards are no joke. I know that they were all the joke, actually comedians were taking up that storm. But it's very complicated. It's really complicated, complex work that are. Oops, did you get lost, Pete?
I'm here. Just keep going.
Okay,
Complicated
it's
work.
complex work, but I don't think it's too much. I think what's too much is kind of the standardization that everybody has to do the same. I really like schools having the autonomy to have programs that meet the needs of their communities, but it's a big job. I mean, raising humans is a big job. I would say what would make it easier or make it more palatable is if parents worked, or sometimes it's not the kids' parents, maybe it's just their supporters, if they
Yeah.
were partnered with. If kids came to school fed, clean, loved, and
Yeah.
supported, teachers could do miracles with kids. But I'm telling you, the kids in California are under some pretty stressful situations.
Yeah.
So that's a big job for parents to send kids to school fed, loved, clean, and ready to learn.
Yeah. Well, that
So,
seems
and
like a
that's
low bar, and I know parents always think that they're like really leaning on this problem, but maybe all of us parents have to just buckle down and keep adding hours until our kid is at the mark that we're at, right? And that's hard when you're trying to make ends meet and work and everything else that you have to do.
totally. And I'm
Yeah.
not a proponent of homework. Did you hear me say homework in those things?
I sure didn't. Yeah.
No. Okay.
Let me-
So I want to talk to you
yeah.
about some books that I had shared with you. My favorite new book is called Thrivers.
Okay.
Um, so if you want to share that one,
I
this
am.
lady
Yeah.
is an amazing. Okay. So you've had lots of art authors on your show.
Yes.
I am not an author. I am a practitioner, but
Mhm.
I am a vast reader. And this is my favorite book of the year. Um, Parents of any aged kid, but if you have a 3 or 4 year old, you're going to be ahead of the path if you read this book. So this is about the whole complex of don't have your kid on the competition travel soccer team because it just burns them out and makes them miserable. It talks about social media and really the long haul of making your kid successful and resilient, because they're going to come up with some problems. So recommend that book because when I said, send your kid to school fed, loved, clean, and ready to learn, this book talks about what all that means.
That's in
And
the comments. Anybody who's looking, you should be able to find that. Okay, go ahead.
it's a great book.
Okay.
And then, okay, so if your kid can read, the world of learning is open up to them, makes everything so much easier. But reading isn't just like sounding out a word and being able to read it. It's a whole world of literacy. So this book called, what is it about dyslexia? Overcoming Dyslexia. Actually, if I ever get a chance to meet Dr. Shaywitz, I would tell her, retitle this book like How to Help Your Child Learn to Read and What Are the Problems They Could Encounter. Because dyslexia became a sexy word back when Tom Cruise said he was dyslexic. But dyslexia really means any problem reading. And there are very, very, very few true dyslexics where they see a word and it's backwards or they can't decode.
Mhm.
In my 29-year career, I have run across like 3 true dyslexics.
So it's
But
really dyslexia then, not dyslexia.
it's like having a hard time with letters, but not like
Mhm.
having the true, like you are a dyslexic.
Okay.
Because, you know, anyways, it's just like anything, it's a spectrum of anything. But this
Mm,
book talks about how kids pick up vowels and consonants and the pattern of which they read it. And I give this book as a baby shower gift. And at the
mm,
very back is my favorite part, is a list of books to read that build phonetic understanding. So
mm,
Hop on Pop, that's in there.
mhm.
Um, any book that helps with phonics and rhyming and all of the nursery rhymes that we learned when we were kids, that
Yeah.
cadence and understanding syllables and um, the, what's the word? Onomatopoeia. When
Onomatopoeias. I love those. Yes.
kids can feel that in language because they've been exposed to it. Oh my gosh, that all of that goes together in the brain to help them read. So that is
Right.
a great book on understanding a window into the brain about how we decode. And when a teacher says, "Oh, you know, Pete is not decoding," that means you're not taking the consonant vowel consonant sound and blending it.
Mm,
Ah, pop,
mhm.
and it will explain how you can help the neurons in your brain connect those things. But if your kid has some literacy understanding before they show up at school, a concept of language, and they need this, right? They need you to look in their eyes and talk to them. And then you need the parents to say, "Now you tell me in a
Mm,
sentence," and say things like, "Oh, Pete, your fork fell underneath your chair. Can you
mm,
lean
mhm.
over and reach under your chair and pick up your fork and put it back on top of the table?" So, did you hear all of those directional words and then
Yeah.
steps in that sentence? And then I would say, if I was your mom and exemplifying the language, I would say, "What are you going to do, Pete? What are you going to do first?" "I'm going to lean over." "And then what are you going to do?" "Pick." "No, Pete, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to pick up the fork." "You're going to pick up the fork? That's awesome, Pete." Blah, blah, blah. We just need to exemplify clear and appropriate language, and that helps kids be readers too.
Okay. You had a couple other books. Do you want to go through those now, or do you want to let me ask you a question?
What other books did I have? I
You
had, oh,
had
The First Days of School
First Days.
by Harry
Yes.
Wong. Okay, so this, you picked up an old cover of this, and you can get this one on Amazon. There's a newer one with a newer cover. But this guy,
Okay.
Harry Wong, he is the ultimate guru of teaching. He talks about being a professional, put your degrees on your wall in your classroom, meet kids out front and shake their hands. We could do fist bumps now because of COVID.
Yeah.
Speak to children in complete sentences and expect them to speak to you in complete sentences. So if you just flip through this book, it's got all kind of pages. If you're looking for a teacher, this is who you want to see in your classroom. So this book is so old, but it is a standard about what teaching and learning should look like in a classroom.
The one I showed you was the fifth edition, and it was like I can't even find the most recent edition. There's so many
It's
versions
all
of
over
it.
Amazon. That's like
Yeah.
15 bucks. Amazon.
I
And then
want we're gonna
another book, the last
go
book I
ahead.
wanted to talk about was called Leader in Me.
The
And that
leader.
you guys will all recommend, or you'll all remember the name Stephen Covey. So
Right.
this is like the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is the kid edition about how students can be leaders. And the current district that I am working in, I love this district so much. I applied twice for this position, 5 years apart, and I got the position the second time I applied. The whole district is a Leader in Me district,
Nice.
basically encouraging every student to be a leader. And you don't have to be the teacher in the classroom to be a leader. You don't have to be the
Yeah.
principal of the school to be a leader. Any kid can be a leader.
You can absolutely lead within an organization. When I worked and advising the army and using my intelligence skills, I was leading. I was like, I understand what the commander wants. I'm going to get him things he can't get from anybody else. I'm going to present it to that commander, and then they're going to end up going in that direction because I know how. That's how you lead within an organization. I had no rank. I had no like nothing, but I was able to build influence because of that leadership. And it's right. We always think of like the alpha dog, but you can there's more dogs than that. They're just different. So it's great that you guys talk about that. I'm desperate to talk to you about external influence and the
Oh,
well-being of kids.
okay.
The access to porn is ubiquitous now, right? And TikTok, and I know in Benicia, my hometown where I grew up, they just had an incident, multiple incidents, and this must happen every single day. Is a kid sent a picture of a gun to
Yes.
another kid, and it's like, I'm going to shoot the school up, and you're like, oh my god, now we have to deal with this, and like, is it real? And then the parents freak out, everybody gets crazy about it. All of this stuff is not stuff that's on your planner. Like at 10:15, yes, a kid sends another kid a picture of a gun.
Yep. Okay, so to the parents listening to this
Yeah,
podcast or watching, I just really want to encourage every parent to be so in your kids' business. There should not be any daylight between what your kids are up to and what you know they're doing. And that is hard, and it is all consuming and pretty emotionally draining. And sometimes the kids put up a bunch of barriers, but you have got to be involved because kids have come to schools and shot up schools. And so I think it's every parent's responsibility to know what their kids are up to and what they have access to. I'll leave that there. Now, to the other parents, right? So I think it's really important that we're honest with our kids about, look, this is a possibility. And isn't this sad that this is what our kids go to school thinking about? Like they think about it. If you ask a third grader, they'll tell you they think about if someone's going to come in their room and shoot up their room. It makes me emotional because I've been through a school shooting before, not at my school, but at my colleague's school. Still affects all of us. Okay, it happens. Unfortunately, it shouldn't happen in our world, but people are cuckoo. And I'll tell you, it's everybody's responsibility. If you are a teacher on a campus, you got to have your eyes out. If you are a student on a campus, you have to listen and pay attention. If you are the principal, you better be the first one running towards a danger. And that means texting, talking, chitter chatter, Facebook ridiculousness. And we are on. When you say, is this a big job? I mean, school principals are on from 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight. And I've been on the phone with principals, like we're looking up kids' addresses. I'm with the police officers going to knock on doors for this exact situation. A kid said, oh, they have a gun and they're going to shoot it up. Until 2 o'clock in the morning, I was with the police officers knocking on kids' doors, finding out, oh, the parent is home. Great. Do you have weapons? Yes. Are they locked up? Yes. Is this it? Okay. No, this one doesn't have it. That is what we do now. And nobody talks about that in the news. They don't say about all of the things that have been solved. They talk about the issues that didn't get solved. And I don't know how you solve we have stoplights everywhere. People still run red lights, right?
Every day, every intersection, every single day. Right? Yeah.
And there's guns in this country and in families' homes, and as much safeguards as we have. So what I'm saying is kids can be part of the solution because they can tell when they see something. Yeah. And kids don't like to tell, but hopefully they see something, say something. That is what came out of, there's a whole Sandy Hook promise about you can tell and it's all anonymous, and we all get a phone call that is nationwide. You can make an anonymous tip and they'll call any of us because all of our administrator phone numbers are accessible by this organization. But we need people to tell. We need kids to tell. And we need parents to know what their kids are up to. We need kids to be fed, clean, loved, and come to school ready to learn. Because the kids who are bringing the guns to school are not fed, loved, ready to learn, and supported. They're not. They're struggling because healthy people don't do that.
I don't want to get into the ideology of it or any kind of political aspect of it, but how much can you talk about that parent that's exasperated by all this attention spent in the media on, we'll just call it left-leaning teachers that want to inculcate kids. We hear this story all the time in a variety of ways. And I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I just want you to talk to the parents that are feeling like their kid is being exposed to things that that's not in their parenting plan. What do you do if you're in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Number one is talk to the teacher, because sometimes the kids don't have it right. I'm just saying, sometimes the story gets twisted. So ask your child, tell me more. And then what happened? And then what was said? And then what were they wearing? Or tell me more. How did that make you feel? Right? So
Yeah.
get all of that information and then pick up the phone and talk to the teacher. Call and make an appointment. Can we talk at 3:15 after school on Wednesday? Or, oh, Wednesday's not good. That's your staff meeting day. How about Thursday? And I'll
Right.
say if the teacher isn't able to find time for you in a week, that would be a red flag. You would want to go then to the principal. But any principal worth their weight would say, have you talked to the teacher first? So always
Yeah.
start with the teacher. And then say you don't get anywhere with the teacher, they don't respond to you, or you don't like their answers. Like Kimberly came home and said she felt uncomfortable because blah, blah, blah was said. And then you don't like the answer that the teacher gives, then you say, thank you so much for your time. And you call the principal and you say, this happened. I talked to the teacher. I didn't feel comfortable, but what are some of my next steps? Because I think if you talk to the teacher and you have an open conversation and the principal, you'll be able to work it out. There are some situations that are wacky. Like I don't have any explanation for why people do some of the things that they do.
Right.
And that's why we have a human resources department, and they do a investigation. And I know this drives parents crazy, but the investigation is privileged between the employer and the employee. So there is some information that you report out to the parents, like, okay, we did this investigation. We talked to these people, blah, blah, blah. We found out this, we interviewed 10 other students in the class based on what you shared. We have these professional procedures in place. 9 times out of 10, Pete, or I'll say 99 times out of 100, you can work it out with the teacher. Like, when you said this, it made my kid feel that way. The teacher doesn't want to make your kid feel bad. I've learned over the years. No, you didn't. But I've learned over the years what to say and what not to say when I've been on the phone with a parent. Like I'd get off a phone. I'm like, that didn't go well. I'm not going to say it that way next time, I've learned over the years, and that's how people learn. Like, when I said that, it offended that student. Oh my gosh. I just want them to learn their multiplication tables. I do not want to offend a kid. I can do better. Right. There's a lot of that self-learning. We're just humans, right? And every once in a while, there's a weird situation. And again, that's why we have human resources. They investigate. And so it is true. There's some pieces of teachers have rights of First Amendment rights themselves. There's a really tricky line there, and we are developing that line every day. But I'll say that that's not the norm. I would say that's not the norm. But when it happens, you want to go with it. Call your teacher, have a conversation. Call the principal if that doesn't resolve it. If it doesn't get resolved by the principal, then you call human resources. Every school district has a human resources department.
And I don't want to minimize any of this stuff, but when you look at things like school violence and shootings and everything, these things are, they're at the end of the bell curve, that it's all chaos, right? And you just can't account for chaos. And the planner always has the advantage. And so you're trying to minimize risks and all of these things that are so random. You're like, how in the world do we build a comprehensive policy to prevent X from happening, whether it's violence or, whatever stupid thing the next kid thinks up. And you're like, so some of this stuff we have to look, tragedies are going to happen. And however you want to label the tragedy, they're just going to happen. We can't eliminate all of it. And the other thing, and you talked about this, and then I have one more thing before we close out that I want you to talk about, but I want you to talk about this too. The pace of how kids develop, how they learn, how they manage a problem. You look at like 7th grade, you're like, this kid's 6 foot tall, that kid's 2'4", and then whoop, in 2 years, the other one, it's just so crazy. So talk a little bit about, if your kid is having problems, it might take some time to find the right solution, to then work on, like, these things aren't like instant.
Yes. Okay. So there's a whole plan to do. It's called intervention. And we have tiered interventions in the classroom. And then when it gets beyond what the classroom teacher can do, we do something that's called a student study team. So we would ask the parents to come into a meeting. That the school counselor might be in there. It might be a school psychologist. It might be the educational specialist. And we talk about what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what do we need to do? And sometimes you go the path of special education. Sometimes you go the path of 504, which is a plan for students with disabilities, depending on what they need. Sometimes you just do 6 weeks of intervention and things get better. But I'll say when you hit a roadblock like that, that's many years or many months of concerns. So it's going to take either many months or many years to fix it. So yeah, but we have processes in schools to handle that. And it just takes a while, I will say. Um, and you know what is the really important ingredient in that whole process is trust.
Uh-huh.
And so you have got to have trust between the parents and the staff and the student. And if you have that magic trust, you can pretty much accomplish anything for kids. I had a family, and I remember sitting in an individualized education plan meeting with this family. Tons of trust. Family is amazing. Teachers were locked on. Kid did his best. And at the end of the meeting, the parents were unhappy because they said, "Can you just help my kid have a friend at school? He
Mm.
doesn't have one friend." And boy, did that convict us, like, because his friend was the teacher. And here we are, like, oh, it's so great. The kid loves to come to school. But that wasn't going to help him when he went to middle school.
Yeah.
And so we're like, you know what? Yep, we're on it. We are going to help this kid have a friend.
I love it.
So I, we, and I will say, I mean, and I've been accused by people very close to me to say, but Kimberly, you've worked in really high functioning organizations, and not all organizations work that way. I'll agree. But you can find an organization that loves kids. You can find a district or a school that loves kids and will love your kid.
We're talking about California schools, but like you said earlier, California educates more school than any other state. And so there's a lot of stuff. Every variable possible is present here in California. I'm always a fan. Goes back to my SPY days. If you're not getting the outcome you want, hey, invite the principal, invite the teacher over for dinner at your house and entertain them in your world. And I promise, if you're open to it, if you don't have to be an asshole the whole time, you will connect with that person over the dish that you bring. Let them bring you a dish. And look, it takes time, right? But what's the most important thing you do as an adult, if you're a parent? It's raise that kid. Right. So take the time. You don't gotta have an inappropriate relationship. Say it again.
For years, we weren't allowed to do that, to go to kids' houses, and now we are, because now most districts are starting to hire social workers. And so social workers will go out and do home visits with kids and see what's their strength in their home. Like, let's bring that strength into the school. Mm-hmm.
What are you excited about for the future with schools?
Yeah. You were asking about influences, outside influences. So like the whole TikTok and YouTube, and even sometimes we find out, let me think of what the name of it was. I think it's called Devilicious or something. I don't know. There was a channel on, I think it was Snapchat, actually. Anyway, they were sending out challenges, how to do, like 1 month, the challenge was slap a teacher.
Right.
And kids did it because they talked about it. And there was always one kid who's like ready to get in the mix. Like, oh, well, I learned about it on TikTok and did it. I can't remember. It was Snap. If you ask a kid, they'll tell you. And there was another one, like throw a table challenge, slap a girl on the rear end challenge. And so this is the kind of stuff that kids are exposed to. So I'll just ask parents. In high school, that's it. Whatever the rules you put into place, whatever human you crafted, that's what you got in high school. But up until then, I mean, parents, charge the kids' cell phone in your room. So many times, parents have told me, "Oh, I can't take my kid's phone. That's their alarm clock." I'm like, please go and buy them a alarm clock on your way home. But you get up and go get them. You get up and get them up and ready for school. So like, charge your kid. Nothing good is going to happen on that cell phone after 9 p.m. Take the cell phone and charge it in your room, and read a book to your kid, or just read a book in the presence of your child. And that also has a lot of research behind it about how that's good for kids' literacy. If you just are a book reading family, or a newspaper reading family, or a comic book reading family, or if you listen to Audible books in the car while you're driving somewhere. But I cannot encourage people enough to just take the cell phone away from a kid by 9 o'clock and be in charge of charging it, because they have access to everything. Even if you're looking on their phone, there's apps that go behind apps that, like, it looks like a regular app, but it's something else behind. And kids learn all the time how to cheat the system. There's a guy named John Moffitt, Moffitt. He does a lot of parent training. And whenever he does training, oh my gosh, you should see the staff in the room. They're like, they're on their cell phone. They're like, I didn't know that. I need to put on these safeguards. And oh my gosh, I'm letting whoever know like what's my like secret information on my phone. It's just really helpful. Yeah, it's young training to help kids to not have those influences. But then by the time they're in high school, that's it. Like world open. They got to have a cell phone.
Welcome to the world. What's exciting to you about the state of education and where we're headed?
Okay. I'm glad you asked me that question yesterday because I've been thinking a lot about it. What is exciting is that we do a lot more group work with kids and we let kids solve problems, and we are moving along. Some of us are better at it than others of us. But the whole process is to have teachers be the guides and let kids learn. We did a project 4 years ago, and it's still happening in Carlsbad with First Lego League. And so we had second graders competing in robotics. And it just so happened that it was second grade. And the second grade teachers, guess how much they knew about robotics? This much.
Nothing?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. They knew zero. But we bought the materials. Actually, the Ed Foundation bought it. And I told the teachers, just dump the box on the floor, give one of the kids who can read the directions, and let them figure it out. And one teacher took me up on it, and she said, Kimberly, I don't know what they're doing, but they figured it out. We did this whole day. And then the parents came in and they heard the kids were making robotics. And if you look it up, First Lego League Robotics, it is actually from the Lego company, but it's a separate wing of their company. And schools across the country are doing this, and kids are figuring out challenges about how to move something on Mars. They're figuring it out.
With the Lego challenge?
They have to use a little robot and code it so that it completes this challenge. And they have to solve a problem. One time it was moving something on Mars. Another time it was water conservation. Another time it was like how to dispose of trash appropriately. And the kids create these amazing creative solutions. That's one thing I'm excited about. I'm excited about helping kids be ready for college or career. It used to be only like just put them all to college, and many school districts changed their graduation requirements to be the requirements to get into the UC system or the Cal State system. And that eliminated a lot of kids from getting high school degrees. Can you imagine? Because we need kids to be air conditioner technicians. We need kids to be plumbers. We need kids to we need people to run businesses, to build our infrastructure, to, you know, be running the soldering those rebars so that our freeways are safe. You know, we need everybody to have productive jobs in this country, not just go to college and be an English professor. So not that that's the only reason you go to college, but you know what I'm saying. Not everybody is ready for college at 18. I mean, how are kids supposed to know what they want to do? So we need to have kids be ready for the world. So there's this whole new resurgence of CTE, career technical education. And so many districts across the country are looking for welders and plumbers and coders who don't have teaching credentials, but that can have the parallel degree to come in, or parallel certifications to come in and teach a section or two in high schools. So I'm really excited about that.
I want to wrap it up.
Yeah.
What?
Okay. I'll just say this one last thing. I'm excited for kids to love school again. I think it was culturally cool for kids to hate to go to school for a while. And this whole coding, and you can do things your own way, and maybe you can learn at home. Like online learning is good for some kids. They thrive that way. So there's just more avenues to meet kids where they want to be. And that's what's exciting to me. So in my role, my job is to find what it is that works for kids and make sure that teachers and students have those resources.
I would say, just to help out what you're talking about here too, if you have a problem politically with what's going on in school districts and you don't have any kids in that school, well, then go volunteer, go do something. Don't complain, get up and get to work. And this is not to make me great, but every year I go back two semesters, fall and spring, and I talk to the seniors are going to graduate, right? These are about to be adults. They're going to get let out of the fenced cage that they're in at the high school where they have very little of their own freedom, and they're going to have cars and meal cards and all kinds of things that they can go do whatever they want. So I just get in between them and that time. And I'm like, here I am. I'm you from the future. What do you want to ask me? What do you want to learn about? And so anybody can do something like that. You can take your time, you can volunteer, you can mentor. So if you're worried about it, well, then damn it, do something about it. Don't just complain about the damned hippies and the damned this and the damned that. Go get damned busy helping work on the problem.
Yes.
Anything in closing?
Anyone sign up to take the CBEST. It's 4th grade math. Anybody can pass it. And go sub. If you have a college degree, go sub. And then if you do not have a college degree, just go walk into your local school district and say, I'd like to be a sub lunch duty lady or a cafeteria worker, because we need subs, we need community members, and I think you'll see some amazing things. I mean, if you're having a bad day, the best place to go is kindergarten. Kids are happy, they are cute, they are happy to see you, they're so excited. Secret, if a principal's having a bad day, you're going to find that principal in the kindergarten room, because that's the best place in the world.
Hey, thanks for being on the show. Stand by. Let me wrap this up.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by